Hello, Incarnation third graders. Welcome to Math with Mrs. Martin. Today we're going to be doing lesson 4 on page 771, and we're talking about the area of a figure. The area is the inside measurement of a figure in square units. Mrs. Shreddy talked about the perimeter being the outside of a figure. Today we're going to talk about the inside of a figure. The unit we measure it with is square units. So we're going to talk about those. 1 square unit is just a little square. For example, if I have a figure like this, it's not going to be perfect, and I wanted to know, and these were shaded in, and I wanted to know what was the area of this figure, I would go ahead and count the square units. 1, 2, 3, 4. This figure has 4 square units. Now the reason I wrote numbers in there was just to help you count and keep track of the little units that you are counting. You could also go like this. Here's the figure again. To count the square units, you could just put a dot. 1, 2, 3, 4. So choose whichever way works for you. I prefer the numbers just so we count correctly. Now sometimes when we're measuring area, the square unit is not shaded all the way. It might be only shaded halfway and look like this. Instead of 1 whole square unit, that equals 1/2 square unit. If I see 2 halves, I know that 2 halves equal a whole. So if I see this unit, and I see another unit that might look like this, and it's a half also, I can just put a circle around that and know that 1/2 plus 1/2 is 1 whole square unit. So let's talk about that in terms of a figure. Say for example, I have a figure that looks like this. And these are shaded. I'm going to shade them lightly so you can see. And just half of this is shaded, and just half of this is shaded. Now let's find the area of this figure by counting the holes first. We're going to count the holes first. 1, 2, 3, 4. There are 4 holes there. Up here there's a half. Up here there's a half. 1/2 and 1/2 equals another hole. So I'm going to go ahead and add the 4 holes plus the 1 hole to get 5 square units. Okay, let's hop into our book now. So go ahead and open up your book to 771 while I go ahead and turn on the definition of area again. Area is the number of square units needed to cover a figure without overlapping. Sometimes you need to count the numbers of half square units covered by the figure. So here's an example of some half units with half of the area shaded. Each of these is 1/2 of a square unit. Example 1. Listen as I read or read along with me. In art class, Haley drew the figure at the right on the grid paper. What is the area of the figure Haley drew? First, we're going to count the whole squares. So we're going to go over here to your figure, and you'll be able to see it a little bit better in your math book. But I'm going to count first I'm going to mark off the half so that I can see it up here. And we are going to just count the whole squares, and I'm going to use numbers to make sure I'm counting correctly. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. And there's my whole squares. There are 14 whole squares. Now I see that this is a half, so I'm just going to draw a little arrow and put 1/2. Draw another little arrow over there, 1/2. What do we know about 1/2 and 1/2? 1/2 plus 1/2 equals 1 whole. Count the number of half squares. 1 half square, 2 half squares. There are 2 half squares. 2 half squares equals 1 whole. So now we're going to add those together. And they show us 2 ways to add them here. First, they have the 14 whole squares plus the 2 half squares. But it's sometimes easier for your mind to think of the 2 half squares like a 1 whole square. So we're going to go ahead and use this equation right here. 14 plus 1 whole square is 15 whole squares. So the area is 15 square units. Go ahead and flip to the next page. We're going to start at the top with example 2. Now you will notice that the figures aren't as easy to see because they're on a little geoboard, the little geoboard with rubber bands. So on this figure, we're going to go ahead and trace the wholes and the halves just so we can see it better when we get there. But listen as I read the question, or go ahead and read along with me. Raphael created the geoboard figure at the right to represent the design he created. 1 square unit on the geoboard represents 1 square centimeter. On the design, what is the area of the design? So keep in mind, this question asks for 1 square centimeter. We talk about area in square units, but you could also have any unit of measurement in there. It could be square units, it could be square centimeter, you could do square meter, square inch, any unit of measurement. So whatever the question asks for, that's what the unit becomes. In this question it says square centimeter, so that's the unit we're going to be looking for. It does not change how we do the problem. It only changes how we write the unit at the end. Count the number of whole squares. There are whole squares. So I'm going to go ahead and trace the inside of this geoboard peg to peg. And that will help me see the holes and the halves. So you can go ahead and trace with me. I'm going to start with the 4 corners because that was easy for my eye to see. And then the next that was easy for my eye to see was connecting the pegs here from the middle peg. And that leaves us with our halves. That leaves us with our holes. I'm going to trace our halves in red. There's a half there. This way our eyes just see the halves and holes easier on these geoboards. Okay, and now we're going to go ahead and count the number of whole squares. Count with me and write the numbers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There are 8 whole squares. Count the number of half squares. I'm going to go ahead and write my half squares. I like to pull my half squares out just because I think it's easier to see. So I'm just drawing a line from the half squares and writing half each time. Now I can easily count how many half squares I have. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There are 8 half squares. What I also like to do is to remind myself that 2 half squares equals a whole. So I'm just going to circle this and pretend that's a whole, because it is. 2 halves, 1 whole. 2 halves, 1 whole. 2 halves, 1 whole. So we have 8 half squares, but we also have 4 wholes. And that will make it easier for us to do the math. The next step is to add 8 whole squares plus 8 half squares. Remember that our minds want to add wholes together. So let's go, they rewrote it for us to help us with that. 8 whole squares plus our 4 whole squares. 8 plus 4 is 12. So the area is 12 square units. Now if you remember back at the question, it asked for how many square centimeters. So we're going to change our unit to centimeters. The area of the design is 12 square centimeters. Let's go over on the guided practice at the bottom. Here's some figures and geoboards again. Find the area of each figure. We know that we want to count the wholes first and the halves second. So I'm going to count the wholes. 1, 2, 3. And then I'm going to pull out the halves. There's a half there, and a half here. I'm going to circle 2 halves equals 1 whole. So now I have 1, 2, 3 wholes, plus this hole is 4 wholes, and we still have this half here that we can write. So the answer is 4 wholes and a half. 4 and a half square units. On the geoboard again, go ahead and color in the squares so that your eyes can see them better. And let's go ahead and count the wholes first. 1, 2, 3, 4 wholes. I'm going to pull out this half, pull out this half. 1 half and 1 half is another whole. 4 wholes plus the 1 whole equals 5. This figure has 5 square units. Flip now to the independent practice, and we're just going to do a couple of those together. If you're in my class, you know I like to do a couple in each section, so we're going to go ahead and do that together. I think we're going to do all the evens on this page. This says find the area of each figure. It's a geoboard, so I'm going to go ahead and color in my space, the holes and the halves, just so I can see it better. First we count the holes. 1, 2. Then we pull out the halves. Half here. Half here. 2 halves equals 1 whole. So now I have my 2 holes plus my 1 hole equals 3. This area is 3 square units. Let's go for number 6. The area is square units. I'm going to count my holes first. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then I'm going to pull out my halves. 1 half. 1 half, 1 half, 1 half, 1 half, 1 half, 1 half, 1 half. I'm going to go ahead and circle 2 halves equals 1 whole. 2 halves, 1 whole, 2 halves, 1 whole, 2 halves, 1 whole. So now I have my 4 original wholes plus my 8 halves, which is the same as 1, 2, 3, 4 more wholes. 4 plus 4 is 8. The area of this is 8 square units. We'll just do a couple more on this page. We'll do numbers 8 and 10. If we read these directions, it says find the area of each shaded region if 1 square unit represents 1 square inch. So that's where the unit changed a little bit. It's not just square units, it's a square inch. You will also notice that they have unshaded 1 square unit in each of these figures. We will not be counting that. We're only going to count the shaded area. So here we go. 1, count the wholes first. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We have 9 wholes. Pull out our halves. 1 half, 1 half, 1 half. 2 halves equals another whole. I'm going to add that to this hole. 9 plus 1 is 10 wholes. And we still have this half hanging out there. So the area becomes 10 and 1 half square units. This last one, we're going to go ahead and find the area of this shape. First, we're going to count the wholes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There are 8 holes there. I don't see any halves, so the answer is the area is 8 square inches. I hope this lesson helped you. You can now go back and do the odds on this page, plus the problem solving on the next page, and head on into the homework. See you next time.